We've got this question from Alex, which is about expansions. So he says here about how a lot of times successful board games and card games are produced. They actually then receive expansions that add on to the core elements of the original games. And are these generally planned during the development of the original game, or are they based on feedback of the original game? I don't know if you've got any expansions planned.
I think it would vary from game to game. You know, you've probably got certain games, and you see it on Kickstarter. You know, like certain games will be created with expansions ready to go at launch. You know, so there will be games like that, and then there will be games that fall into that other category. And I think both of those are completely valid, however you choose to do it. But I think the important point I'd want to make here is that you should never make an expansion just for the sake of making an expansion. I read, you know, member of several board game groups on Facebook, as I'm sure you know you are as well, and I do quite often see people talking about expansions that have actually made a game worse. And so I think that's a trap that you could easily fall into. I think there are some games that really suit and are naturally suited to having expansion content. Like our game, for example, is made up of you know, there's multiple characters. They've all got different abilities and talents that they can use. You've got essentially a set of rooms in Dracula's castle, and each room has its own unique deck of cards. So straight away there, you know, it's perfect for any sort of expansion, because you're not going to break anything by adding more cards or more characters. You're just going to add more variety. So, you know, so for our game, it would work. But I think, you know, perhaps that it would be more challenging for a Euro game, or perhaps some kind of, you know, collectible card game where everything is so finely balanced that changing one thing can knock everything out. I think that's where you can run into problems. Changing player counts as well can obviously cause problems. But I think just about recognizing that. But I think, you know, in terms of whether they're planned during the development of the game or they're based on feedback, it will really just vary on a case-by-case basis. In terms of our game and whether we have an expansion, I haven't told anyone this apart from Benji and another couple of people, but yeah, we do have an expansion planned, which I'm really excited about. I've been playing the game now for years, and so I'm really pleased that I can offer an expansion, because just for my own sake, you know, I've come up with some ideas for new cards, some new characters that I think will really freshen up the experience. So yeah, we do have an expansion that we'll be launching alongside the Kickstarter when we go live.
Amazing. Thank you for the exclusive scoop there. Very exciting announcement.
I think I would step in and talk a little bit of sort of Kickstarter industry stuff. I used to work for GamesQuest, who are a big fulfillment company, and work very closely with that Kickstarter model. And I think it's really interesting because the idea of expansion content, certainly from my eyes, is so closely tied into your sense of what your company is trying to do, what your business is trying to do, more so than I think it was once upon a time, which was what the game is actually wanting. Because I think now, I mean, call me cynical, but I think now there's quite a lot of content that's put out that is intentionally lacking. You'll receive a game that is potentially pitched as being complete, but really it's missing a core component that is later added as an expansion. Baron Park is what stuck in my mind, which has the train system that I really felt like should be in the core game. But I think there's often a case of, from a financial perspective, it's much easier to launch with a simpler and slightly smaller game and then use the expansion process to be iterative, to add components, to add complexity, as you as a publisher can then start adding complexity to your business practice. It also comes down to trying to release content as well and looking ahead and saying, are we going to continue making new games, or are we going to continue the life cycle of this game that we're working on? So I think that's also a consideration. And as Kris said, it depends on what your model is in terms of what you as a designer are doing, in terms of whether or not you want to be making new content. What, like, do you have surplus content that you're working on that could be potentially pushed aside to be put into an expansion? Are you play testing something for so long that you've made that content yourself? Or is it potentially created based purely on feedback from the community? We often see games that the expansion will intentionally course correct something and maybe add in a mode that really is the defining mode that everybody wanted in the first place, or correct mechanics. So I think that's also another consideration. Like, you're right, there is no right or wrong answer. It depends on what your practice is trying to do. But certainly from my perspective, I really want to see more games that are whole, complete games, and where the expansion content is something that's for the fans, where the expansion content is expanding the world and making everything feel bigger and denser. Like, Kris and I have a real love of horror games, and one of my early childhood passions was the game Atmosphere, which runs with a VHS tape that you put in. For me, picking up Atmosphere, it's a complete game, and it also makes sense that you would have expansion packs that are entirely different VHS tapes that go in and add these other characters. That felt so natural to expand the world and the idea of something that intentionally was quite limited in the first place. However, had they left out an entire part of the board, I would have felt very differently about it. So I think some games themselves suit them far better than others. And I think that's where Damnation has got it really well, Kris. And I'm really excited about the content that you've been creating, because it expands the world in the right places, I think, in those narrative places, and in the mechanical places. But the core game itself is so rich.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I think that, the cards that we've come up with, the characters we've come up with, there's no new rules or anything like that. So there's no question that it's not like a gimmick that some people, some Kickstarters follow as a way of getting you to commit more. This is very much, it is a genuine expansion that I think just alters the experience a little bit, and just changes it up. I mean, that's something that a lot of the kind of original fans, the fans of the original game, were crying out for, was some more cards, because once you've played it 1,000 times, it becomes a bit stale, so to speak. So yeah, it's just a way of keeping it fresh and interesting.